This one's for people like me, for the mad scientists, for the people that want to get nerdy, for the people that want kind of the esoteric route, right? Because I could tell you all the basic ways to increase GLP-1, to lose fat, to curb your appetite. I could tell you the basics, and I'll tell you right now, things like protein consumption, things like even some coffee, even things like walks, fiber. These things are really important for inducing GLP-1 and they move the needle a lot. But I look at things like, hey, where's the cutting edge research? Where's the newer stuff? Where's the little fringe things that other people might say, nah, that's just weird. It's just the basics. I look at that stuff. So join me and we'll talk about a few interesting ways that you can curb your appetite and increase GLP-1. If you like this kind of stuff, hit that subscribe button and also drop a comment down below for the algorithm. You would be amazed what it does for a video. It helps so much because YouTube just likes that. It's kind of wild. Okay, so the first mad scientist thing that I'm going to talk about is actually not that mad at all because Dr. Andrew Huberman has been talking about it for a while. But when it comes down to fat loss, it's really, really interesting. There was a study published in Obesity Facts that was looking at morning light. Okay, it was a pretty big study. So they did 3 weeks of morning light exposure versus placebo. What they found is that those that were exposed to morning light had a drop in body fat percentage significantly more than the placebo group, and their overall food intake was significantly less. Okay, well that's kind of interesting, and it would make some sense that maybe like circadian cues are aligned, and when circadian cues are aligned, maybe appetite is regulated a little bit more, and consequently you'll lose some body fat. But check out this other study that gets a little more detailed. This study was published in the International Journal of Endocrinology, and they exposed people to all different spectrums of light: blue light, red light, green light, and just like a dim incandescent light versus placebo. And they also did this in situations where people were sleep deprived or not sleep deprived. The long and the short of it is, any amount of any kind of spectrum of light exposure in the morning actually increased leptin levels, which would improve appetite, right? Or in this case, actually decrease appetite, but improve satiety. So we know that light in the morning in any way is actually pretty good. It doesn't mean you should just shine a bunch of blue light from your phone in your face in the morning, but waking up, getting light, stepping outside is good. Okay, but what they found was really interesting was that only the green light and particularly the red light in the morning didn't just increase leptin, but significantly, and the literature said significantly, decreased ghrelin, the hunger hormone. So huge improvements on appetite suppression, and they were even more noticeable if people were sleep deprived. So if you've ever had like those situations where you just haven't slept well and you almost feel like Invasion of the Body Snatchers where you're just like eating a bunch of food, getting morning sunlight for 15 minutes, 20 minutes changes the game. So yeah, it's fringe, yeah, it's nerdy, and people may not want to believe it, but you know what? Let them not believe it. Let them be that way. Let them be the people that 5 years from now are like, maybe he was right, but they'll never admit it, right? Because we see this stuff. And people bag on Huberman, they bag on some of these light scientists, they bag on magnetism and EMF and all these things that actually matter. And I know I sound crazy to some people, but the stuff matters, okay? The mitochondria responds to these things, and we know that. Anyway, I'm getting too heated. Another mad scientist thing that's actually rooted in real science before we get into the wild stuff is having whey protein is actually a really good appetite suppressant. So check out this literature. In fact, I'll read an excerpt from the study as well. So this study was published in Advances in Nutrition. Here's what they said. Data indicates that whey protein is more satiating in the short term, while casein is satiating in the long term. A lot of people will tell you that a whey protein shake actually can make you hungry, but in this case, it's such a quick absorbency that it ends up making it so that you actually curb your appetite for about an hour. So it's a great little quick hack to control your appetite. Now let's get into some more nerdy stuff. Okay, salt instead of something sweet when you're craving a sweet thing. There are these things called NST neurons, okay? Now, non-singulatory tract of the brain, okay? So it's a NST. Now, this area of the brain can actually register sweet things and salty things. And what's interesting is when you look at livestock, you put a salt lick out in the middle of a field, animals are going to find it. Salt is critical for survival, and it's critical for humans. The interesting thing is that this area of the hindbrain actually receives signals from when you consume something sweet or salty. So now we're getting preliminary rodent model evidence, too early to say 100% in humans, but I will tell you from my own personal experience, it works well for me, that when you're craving something sweet, if you have a pinch of salt, or just drink a little salt water or a little bit of electrolytes, it can curb that sweet craving. Because it seems as though these paths almost cross, right? So you're craving something sweet, but you're actually craving something salty. And it's kind of backed up in some, at least observational human data. There's a study in the journal Clinical Hypertension, and basically they found that the more salt that people consumed, and they looked at large cohorts, the less sweet things they consumed. It was like perfectly measured. The more sweet things, the less salt. The more salt, the less sweet. Now, people do have salt tooths versus sweet tooths, so that would make sense. But also, maybe it's just the fact that, and it's not giving them an excuse because maybe they're eating garbage salty food, but if people are eating salty food, they're usually not eating the sweet food as much. And if they're eating more sweet food, they're not eating as much salty food because these cravings are satisfying one another potentially. But this is the kind of interesting stuff that I like, right? This nerdy stuff. This is the kind of stuff that people that are, in my opinion, so evidence-based that they actually forget that there's an outside world outside of what's on a piece of paper. Okay. This kind of stuff excites me because this is how you move forward. You test these hypotheses. Maybe they won't work. Maybe you try it out, it doesn't work. But I would say safely about 85% of people that I talk to have found that this works. When I am craving something sweet, I have something salty and it works. I'll usually just have some electrolytes. I put a link down below for the LMNT electrolytes that I use. It's drinklmnt.com/Thomas. They've been a sponsor on this channel forever. It's the ones that I use. I a lot of times just use their unflavored ones. I like the salt, the magnesium, and the potassium. Simple without any flavorings or anything. But they also have some 0-calorie flavors as well. And they have a sparkling, ready-to-drink version that you can put in the refrigerator or whatever. And it totally, that thing really curbs my appetite because of the, I guess, the carbonation too. But anyway, that link gets you a free sample variety pack. So give them a shot. drinklmnt.com/Thomas, and a big thank you to them for the continued support. The next trippy one is spice. Yeah, okay, here's what's wild. Okay, and if you want to get really weird, you combine spice with green tea, but that's getting kind of strange, right? Okay, so we have this thing called a TRPV1 receptor. When we have something spicy, this basically sends a signal up through the vagus nerve that actually stimulates PYY. It actually stimulates what is called PYY to ultimately produce what's called neuropeptide Y, which signals to the hypothalamus that we're satiated. And this is not any random stuff. There was a study published in Clinical Nutrition where they gave subjects for 3 weeks something spicy. They also gave them green tea, but green tea plus like a chili pepper, like a capsaicin. And what they found is when people were in a positive energy balance, like when they gave them extra food, they simply ate less. But when they were in a deficit, like they were actually cutting calories and they gave them this capsaicin, it would have this impact where they would reduce their appetite significantly more. And it was influencing, once again, TRPV1 to PYY and a subsequent increase in GLP-1, the peptide that's good for glucose modulation and ultimately appetite suppression. So again, we're getting weird, but what does that look like? Adding some spice to your coffee in the morning. It's a big deal. It actually works. And having something spicy, it actually can control your appetite. Now, the last sort of nerdy biohack that I'll add in that is proven in a lot of rodents and proven in other ways is good old use of allulose. Now, before you turn off the video because you've heard me talk about it, just hear this research. It's pretty cool. Plus, it's good for the algorithm. Be a nice person. Allulose is a rare sugar, but you can use it as a sweetener. Okay, so like you can use it to bake with or whatever, or sweeten your coffee. So the coffee, they can make a sweet coffee with a little bit of spice. Ooh, it's pretty darn awesome, right? And then MCT oil added into it too, an extra little perk, which I've talked about in other videos. Point is, allulose binds to the GLUT5 receptor. So it actually blocks some of the absorption of carbohydrates, which controls your glucose. But in rodent models, we're seeing that it's probably one of the more, if not the most potent natural stimulator of glucagon-like peptide 1, GLP-1, which means that we have a potential huge decrease in appetite. And I will share my anecdotal experience. Okay, when I use, like I usually use one called RX Sugar, but when I use their allulose or like an allulose sweetened beverage, it's weird, it's like clockwork. I'm satiated for about 4 hours. And maybe it's psychosomatic, but maybe it's the effect of GLP-1. I don't know. The point is that the evidence is there. It's early, but it's there. Just like everything that I'm talking about. Some of these things, like the light, strong human evidence. But then we kind of move on down the line and we're a little bit more towards like fringe stuff. But it's worth trying because there's really no risk in having some electrolytes. There's really no risk in having some allulose. There's really no risk in having whey protein. There's certainly no risk in getting outside and getting some sunlight. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you tomorrow.